Hello. We're going to continue talking about subject-verb agreement. We had a few notes earlier this week about subject-verb agreement for compound subjects. So we're going to go through the exercise for this, and then we'll go over these last couple of rules for subject-verb agreement that are going to go with the exercise that is due tomorrow. So if you don't have your book, I'm going to give you a minute if you want to pause and take the time to go through and answer these questions, and then I will come back and go through answers. All right, so I've gone ahead and underlined all of the subjects. Each one of these has a compound subject. And remember that really what we want to pay attention to, as well as what the subjects are the conjunctions that link them together, because that depends on, or that affects what rule we're going to follow. So to begin with, number one is actually kind of a trick question. So it says neither my brother nor I. Brother is singular, I is singular. The weird thing about this one, though, is that even though I is a singular noun, we wouldn't say I has, we would say I have. And so the book actually has indicated as the correct answer, but actually if we're going to make the closer subject agree with the verb, we would go with have. So honestly, one or the other, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that does a good job of testing your knowledge of stuff. Okay, anyway, moving on to number two, we have and as our conjunction. So if that's the case, we are always going to use a plural verb, so are is the answer. Number three, again, we're using the conjunction and. Theirs stands for their relatives. So we have our relatives and their relatives are having a picnic together. John and his mother play, again, a plural verb. Number five kind of clues us into or alerts us to an issue that we need to be aware of. In this sentence, it starts with either. And we, in our last set of notes and exercises, we talked about indefinite pronouns, and both, either, neither, these are all words that came up on our lists of indefinite pronouns. Both is always plural, either and neither are always singular. However, in these sentences, those are not being used as pronouns. If you look at what they're actually doing in the sentence, we have both and, we have either or, we have neither nor. So they're functioning as conjunctions, correlative conjunctions, not as pronouns. So as a result, even though either as a pronoun is going to always take a singular verb, it's not a pronoun here. So we follow the rule that we usually would for a compound subject with or in the middle. And we go with the verb or with the subject that's closer to the verb. In this case, that is actors. So the answer is going to be are. So again, that's it's a weird situation. You might see either and think, oh, it's supposed to be a singular verb. But keep in mind what the subject actually is there. Number six, nor is our conjunction. And so we're going to go with the subject that's closer to the verb. So that's cantaloupe, was is the answer. Both the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics are popular with fans. Our class or theirs, and I just want to point out on this, theirs, yes, it ends in an S, but that's not a plural pronoun. We have to ask ourselves what it's referring to. It's referring to their class, so that's still a singular thing. So our answer is going to be is. Number nine, faucet or shower head leaks, singular again, and transistor or capacitor has, again with a singular verb. All right, so we're on to the last 10 of this exercise. Number 11, we have fish or lizard, so we go with the second subject, which is singular, so makes. Trolleys and cable cars, so we need a plural verb, are. Boxers and referee, and makes it a plural verb, so we go with want. Even though you might look at it and think, oh, boxers is plural, referee is singular, we want to go with singular. That only matters if the conjunction is going to be or. If it's and, it's always going to be a plural verb. Both hay and oats are either my team or my sister's. and this is kind of like one on the previous page with theirs. My sister's is referring to my sister's team, which is singular. So since it's or, we need to worry about that. Singular is going to mean that our verb is plays. Chairs and table match. Neither the senator nor her aides, so we make it agree with that second subject. Aides like. Tina or Lori does those problems easily. Number 19 is sort of maybe accidentally included in this exercise because it does not have a compound subject, but it does get us back to an idea that we looked at on earlier exercises where we have to make sure that we're ignoring a prepositional phrase that's getting in between the subject and the verb. So event is singular, and the verb then is going to be is. And then lastly, a patch of poison ivy or a clump of poison oak is growing near here. Okay, our last set of notes that we need to take for subject-verb agreement is this list at the bottom of this screen with other miscellaneous subject-verb agreement rules. So this is just odds and ends that aren't covered by the other notes we've had. I'm actually going to take these same notes and open them up in a Word document so that I can show you some examples of how these work. So first off, words stating an amount that's a single unit or quantity are usually singular. So that's usually applying to things like cost or time. So I could say 10 minutes is the time limit for the test, in which case 10 minutes sounds like it's going to be plural, right? But it's talking about just one amount of time, one set designated period of time. Or I could say 20 miles per hour is the speed limit. Again, miles makes it sound like it's going to be a plural verb, but since it's talking about this as a single unit, a single quantity, it's going to be singular. And then just one more example, because money is another place where we see this a lot. $5 is the price of the toy, is to talk about this overall amount of $5. Now, this doesn't mean that anytime you talk about time or money that you're always going to use a singular verb. For example, if we were to look at the word minutes again, if we did the minutes were flying by, in this case, minutes is there, each one is being kind of counted as its own. You know, it's one after the next, rather than as a group, as a conglomerate. So in that case, you would go ahead and do the plural verb. Okay, next up then is if the title of a work of art or literature or music is, even if it's plural in form, it's always going to take a singular verb. So one work that is often taught in junior English is The Grapes of Wrath. And instead of saying Grapes of Wrath are a book, we say Grapes of Wrath is a novel read in American literature class. Even though you might be looking at it and thinking like, oh, grapes is plural, so we got to have a plural verb. Well, no, we actually look at the title as a whole. That's one work, and so we use a singular verb. Okay, next is sort of a weird situation, but you do come across this from time to time. If you have a sentence with a linking verb in the middle that has a subject and a predicate nominative, and they are not the same number, you want your verb to agree with the subject. So here's an example. Bears are the biggest threat in the woods. That's probably not true, but there it is as an example sentence. Bears is a plural noun. It's the plural subject. Threat here is a predicate nominative. And so then the question becomes like, okay, well, what do we want that verb to match up with? Because it's at odds with one or the other. We make it agree with the whatever the subject is. since with sentences with predicate nominatives, we can flip flop them and they mean basically the same thing. If we switch the sentence around and said, the biggest threat in the woods is bears, now you'll notice that in this one, we made threat into the subject, we made bears into the predicate nominative, and instead of making it a plural verb to go with the plural subject, we make it a singular verb to go with what is now a singular subject. All right, next up is having the subject and the verb agree even when the subject is coming after the verb. Basically, this is just for any unusual sentence, that doesn't go in the regular subject-verb order. You still want to make sure you're correctly identifying what the subject is and that it's agreeing with the verb. So if I said, here are the flowers I picked. Flowers is our subject there, and so it's going to be the verb are is going to need to agree with flowers. And lastly, sentences that use every or many these are going to kind of be like sentences that have the indefinite pronoun everyone or everything or someone or something. They kind of sound like they're referring to a big group. But they actually are singular grammatically. So like every sophomore loves grammar. When we say every sophomore, it sounds like, oh, that's a million sophomores, or at least 65. But we use a singular verb. If we did basically the same sentence with many a sophomore loves grammar. Same thing, many a is going to, even though it makes it sound like it's a big group, grammatically it's still going to be singular and take a singular verb. So the homework assignment that's due tomorrow is in the grammar book. It's page 158 to 159, review exercise A. And so this will contain examples of a lot of the different situations that we've gone through in notes. Follow the directions in the book. If the sentence is correct as it is, then you can just write C. If it's something that has an error, then you should make the correction, write down what the proper verb should be in your notebook. So that should do it for subject-verb agreement for today. Tomorrow I will go through this exercise and we'll wrap up this topic. Next week we'll be going on to pronoun case.